The stages of alchemy and how we can use them for personal transformation. This is Professor Matt. Thank you for joining. What is alchemy? We've talked about it a lot on the channel, but it's always good for a refresher. And today we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the 7 stages of alchemy and what they really mean, how they really relate to the human consciousness and psyche. And I've got some pretty cool photos, of course, some neat artwork for you guys today. And if this video is of interest to you, then feel free to send it to a friend who may be learning about these topics or maybe doesn't know. I just want to say thank you for all my new followers and all my new watchers. I really do appreciate all of your support. I noticed that this happens a lot where one of my videos gets a lot of traction and then it kind of falls off. So if there's anything I can do to maybe change my approach, maybe you guys liked me being in front of the whiteboard, I'm more than welcome, more than happy to try to fix things up so that we can get the ball rolling and get more people in here. It really does help. And as I've mentioned before, a lot of people have been joining my online universities. They've been using my AI tool, which has been awesome. The support really does help. I'm still working through, trying to get back to center, trying to get back to normal. I kind of put myself into a lot of debt, getting all of the credentials, the doctorate, everything. Like I've lost a lot of money in trying to learn a lot of this stuff and get this for people. So now I'm doing the alchemy part, which is, putting in the work and giving back in value and service. So if any of this means anything to you guys, please share this information around. If you are interested in supporting me, just real quick plug, I've got an online university, which has 61 members in there right now. It's $29 a month, and it comes with tons of online courses. You can actually see some of the courses as I scroll down here that are in draft mode. Like I haven't even completed these yet. I'm still working on these. So they're not even live yet. So I am still continuously working on these. I've got a financial literacy course I'm working on. The Kabbalah course is pretty much all done. Shadow work I'm going to be doing. There's a ton of different courses here that are available. In fact, right now, as of now, it's about 42 courses that I have. If that doesn't interest you, as of this morning, I have 51 members using my AI tool that I built. It's really cool. This is another alternative of how you could support me if interested. It gives you a daily planner. If you get the higher tier package, then you can check out the astrology calculator, which gives you tons of really great information, some key insights, and I'm actually expanding this as well. It also gives you a personalized forecast, which talks about you specifically, according to your astrology, your numerology, your Chinese zodiac, things like that. It also tracks your inner alchemy cycle. So this is perfect for today's video topic. This app will actually help you track your alchemy cycles, which are a monthly cycle that you go through, which actually coincides perfectly with this video, but you guys probably know all about it. And it gives you, timing until your next window and what you should do and everything else. So if any of those interest you, please go check those out. Now let's get into the video. The 7 stages of inner alchemy, really just alchemy in general. A lot of people call it different things all throughout human history, especially in European history. That doesn't necessarily mean like white people, right? You say European history, people assume you're talking about white people. There are tons of people of all different groups and races and backgrounds. Egypt was a huge location for this, Library of Alexandria. But most of the artwork and a lot of the writings, the more modern writings that we have on alchemy, is from the European area and parts of Russia, stuff like that. And now here's the funny part is we still use a lot of these symbolisms today. Think of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone or the Sorcerer's Stone, depending on where you live. In the original release in England, in Britain, in the UK, it was called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is a very big alchemy thing. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. But they changed it when they brought it over to the States in America, and they called it the Sorcerer's Stone. Why? Because they didn't want people to know what the Philosopher's Stone was. And this is really important. That should already kind of pique your interest because you're like, what the hell? Now, if you know the story of Harry Potter, then there's, I'm not going to spoil a lot of stuff, but that Philosopher's Stone is actually really important and kind of comes in at the end of the story, right? So it's the actual beginning stage. It's the first movie of the septinology, I think that's the word, the 7 books and the 8 films. I think they've made that last film split into 2. But anyway, so in the whole whatever, the whole anthology, I guess, of excuse me, Harry Potter, his entire journey, that stone actually is the beginning and the end. So I really like that, J.K. Rowling kind of did that. Sorry to spoil it if you haven't seen it yet. But yeah, alchemy, really interesting, because that is actually how alchemy works. Oh, I got something. I got like a little hair in my mouth. At the end of the day, yeah, there it is. The 7 stages of alchemy. Sometimes people say 8 stages. The stages of alchemy are all in line and in tandem with the cycle of creation. Okay, so through alchemy, you see the 3 stages, all right, which are most of the time symbolized by the elements of salt, sulfur, and mercury. However, those 3 stages are really more indicative of the God of God, or the 3 cardinal directions of astrology: generation, oscillation, development, or destruction, right? So the D stands for, sometimes people say development, sometimes people say destruction. It's really either or. It's kind of multifaceted. But the G stands for the creation, the generation. Okay, the O stands for the existence, the oscillation. And then the D stands for the development, or the destruction of something into that generation phase. So everything goes through this process, including us at a very microscopic level. We're constantly doing this with our psyche. We're constantly doing this with our bodies via mitosis, right? Mitosis is that cyclical process which governs our inner alchemy process. It governs the sacred secretion, if you've heard of that, and things like that. This is very important to keep in mind, because again, this is all about how life rehabilitates itself. Okay, that is essentially what we are here to do: rehabilitation. And that is a really large aspect of why we are, that's why there's shackles. It's like why we're shackled here in this physical realm, right? It's through rehabilitation. In other words, we are supposed to die and transform. We are supposed to change and evolve over time. So alchemy covers, a lot of people think that it's pretty blasphemous or heretical or something to study alchemy or to understand these stages, or it goes against the Bible. But that's actually, none of that is the case. In the book of Revelation, John specifically writes about how the 7 churches of Asia, the 7 churches, are the churches that are going to save the humanity. Essentially, they're what's going to kick in order for everything to kind of go right in those final days. And those are very synonymous with these 7 stages of alchemy. In a societal sense, we are undergoing a destruction and a rebirth, and it's really going to be up to us, the people, if we're able to take back control in our time frame. And there's a lot of imagery that has to do with alchemy. You'll see in this imagery, there's basically these 4 major orbs. 3 of these orbs have to deal with creation, and then one of them is source. Right, so it's always about how source has created separate parts in order for unification and the prolonging of the evolution of life to continue and substantiate itself. And it's really cool. Like, that's like the thing I want to kind of key in here. But if we're really going to talk about alchemy, we have to talk about this guy. My grandfather, my daddy, Carl Jung. He is my man. No, I'm just joking. He's probably one of my most favorite people in all of human history, though, if I'm really being honest. And it just so happens that, me and him share the same moon sign. We were a few degrees apart. Actually, I think we were 1 degree off from each other. I have a moon in Taurus, just like he did. So I have a very strange fascination for this man. My brain really appreciates the way that his brain worked. And I wish that I could have had a conversation with him before he passed. But, stay lovey. That's just how it works, right? So Carl Jung, I'm not really talking about personality theory. I just really like this photo of him. Okay, I kind of geek out about Jung. If you haven't noticed, I talk about him all the time. When people, I've actually been asked who are the 3 most influential people that have influenced my work, and I take my whole life into consideration here, because when I was really young, I was really, really big into Jesus and Buddha. Those were the 2 guys that I kind of carried with me throughout all of my youth. I read a lot of the New Testament, and I read a lot of like Zen Buddhist quotes, right? And the 3rd one would definitely be Carl Jung. He was who I got really big into in college, and like, probably the later years of high school, college. Just studied him like an animal, because everybody kind of glosses over him and they study all the other people, but he was really the true crackpot genius, I'll tell you. So let's talk a little bit about alchemy, especially from a Jungian model. Okay, because Carl Jung has a really great way of making this shit practical. Okay, so a lot of what deals with how we learn has to do with the subconscious. Okay, and specifically the subconscious. Each one of our individual subconsciouses. If there's, yep, here we go. Each one of our individual subconscious, or also called the personal unconscious, is tapped in and connected into this network. Okay, I want you to think of it like this. We have cell phones, we have laptops. They're all connecting to a network we call the internet. Well, that network has always been there before technology. And that network is in the ionosphere. Okay, it's in the energy within the air. And we're all breathing in and out. So that means that we are all essentially like some form of mechanism, like some form of machine. We are all constantly tapping in and out of this field. This field being the Earth's field. But the Earth's field has its own, I guess what you could call consciousness. We see that played out with things like hurricanes. That's a great example. We see that played out in things like tornadoes, where you can see the wind patterns and the movements and how that energy flows. Well, it's very similar to the energy that flows throughout our body. So it's like all is one and all is connected. However, it's very multifaceted and it's very multi-layered. Our brains, specifically our unconscious mind, not the consciousness. Now you can train your consciousness to tap into this, and this is where like meditation and all those things come in. This is where people, get really silly, I would say, because this is a very big deal, and I don't think people really even understand what it is. Whenever you're doing something spiritual and you get those messages or those divine signalings, you're tapping partially into collective unconscious energy, right? And other people are like, no, I'm going to different planes of existence and I'm going to the 12th dimension, blah, blah, blah. No, you're not. Like that's not how this stuff works. Okay. When you're consciously trying to tap into the inner fabric, what you're really doing is you're harmonizing with a specific frequency, and your unconscious mind is going to unwrap the energy that is being shown to you in messages and themes and ways that you yourself understand or know. Okay, so think about how nobody talked about aliens before like 100 years ago, and now everybody thinks that they're talking with aliens. Once we introduce something into the collective stream, it then becomes real. A great example of this would be Satan, actually, because Satan wasn't really this existing figure in biblical canon until my buddy and I were just talking about this yesterday, and he was actually the one that was filling me in on this, Coach Rich, and basically the Shaitan wasn't really even a big part until a certain point in human history, specifically with the Babylonians and blah blah blah. But the nature of this is to essentially say that symbols, behaviors, none of these things really exist until we create them and throw them into the collective unconscious. And the collective unconscious is like a network, and each one of us can tap into that network, and that's where we get a lot of symbolism from. Okay, that's where we get these dreams, that's where we get these visions, that's where we get a lot of these interpretations. So whereas people think that they're tapping into some alien etheric realm, what they're really doing is they're just connecting deeper into what their brain is trying to show them through storytelling, because our minds operate partially on storytelling. There's logical, and then there's non-logical. Okay, there's more emotional and interpretive and artistic and imaginative. That's right and left brain hemispheres. Okay, so most people are living in their left brain. So once they start to experience things in their right brain, even if they've been right brain their whole life, if you don't understand how to unpack and unwork that, then yeah, you're going to think that you're talking with aliens. And maybe you are, maybe who am I to say? But really, at the end of the day, alchemical imagery, just imagery in general, symbols, right? Circles, lines, squares, triangles, numbers, colors. How do we know red is red, right? Is it just because somebody defined it, or is it just because we've all agreed upon it? If we all change and shift opinion, doesn't that change and shift history and change and shift the trajectory of what's actually happening in reality? So to control the thoughts, essentially, is to control reality, right? And that's like kind of a big deal. So at the end of the day, the Philosopher's Stone, bringing that back, is about psychological wholeness, or what Jung would call individuation. So you have essentially in alchemy, there's multiple different methods for this. I like the visuals of this one. I think it's pretty simply laid out. But there's something called spiritual alchemy, okay? And the 7 stages of alchemy are all about the spiritual aspect. Okay, so there's multiple different ways to break this down. Alchemy was also chemistry. It was originally chemistry, and it basically had to, in the physical sense, people would say, yeah, it's turning lead into gold. That's not true. There were people that were doing that, but that wasn't really the whole case of it. It was to understand the propensity of nature. It's to understand the cyclical aspect of nature and how nature evolves. And so we created 7 because we see 7 within ourselves. We see 7 in the sky with the 7 initial planets that we can see without technology. So we essentially, again, the Europeans mainly created a system of 7, which goes in line with, a lot of things, but one of which is called spiritual alchemy, which is about psychology, really. So the first stage is calcination, which would be the burning away of the false self, recognition of faults, fire breaking the material down. Okay, so fire would, in this case, would be light. A stimuli happens which causes you in your calcified state. Okay, calcification, meaning too earthly, right? Like you're like calcium, right? You're calcifying, meaning like muscles like atrophying. Like if you just sit around and you don't work out or whatever, if you don't maintain that pace and that course, then your muscles just waste away, right? So eventually what happens is you start to build up to a point where you either are never going to evolve or some form of stimuli, an inner light occurs, right? And it could be an external thing, but it gives you an inner light. And this is the fire, breaking away the material, the ego cracking under pressure and illusions dissolving. And this is the start of the shadow work, recognizing flaws, your projections, and your unconscious patterns. So what other people call ego death. Although ego death doesn't exist, you can't actually kill your ego. You can slay your ego's control, sure, but you can't actually kill your ego. Identity crisis, midlife crisis, hitting rock bottom, or psychedelic breakthroughs is normally how that kind of occurs. The next stage would be the dissolution or the solutio, dissolving emotional blockages. So this is where solid becomes more liquid, right? This is engaging with our faults. Emotional release, vulnerability, breakdowns, before breakdowns before breakthroughs is what it says. I'm just reading off some notes here that I have. Encountering the unconscious emotions, right? So somatic therapy, emotional catharsis, trauma work, and things like that. Then you have, let's see. Yeah, let me see. Oh, no, wait, go to this one. Yeah. So then you have separation, right? Separation. And the separation is the deep thinking and the understanding of the concept itself, right? Releasing of our faults. This is where basically, let me see. I'm just trying to there we go. This is separating the impurities from the essence. So it's discerning between trauma versus intuition, desire versus addiction, and distinguishing your persona from your true self. So really, at the end of the day, it's like you're stuck. You decide that you want to change, and then the separation occurs where you start to see who you really are versus what you've been pretending to be. And this is really like the part where the shadow comes out. Psychologically speaking, the shadow is the parts of ourselves that we don't want to accept. It's parts of ourselves that we don't like about ourselves. It's parts of ourselves that rule over our ego. So when people are egotistical, it's really actually their shadow. The ego is a puppet. The ego is not even real. The ego doesn't really exist, right? The ego is just how people see themselves in their own minds. Everybody has an ego. Ego is a neutral thing, all right? When you say somebody's got a big ego, that means that you're saying that their ego is bad, right? But somebody can also be humble, in which case you're saying that their ego is good, right? And that's kind of the difference, and that's the way that you have to approach it. But then you do the union of opposites, all right? This is also known as like the lesser stone. And this is the sacred marriage of the sun and the moon, okay? So this is where it allows one to begin their desired path. What this means, this is a very important stage, the conjunction, okay? And Carl Jung would talk about this a lot, this stage in the middle. This is really like the heart stage, if you want to think of it, because it's right in the middle, right? This is where the self archetype okay, it gets activated because it combines the ego with the shadow. Okay, what does that mean? It combines what you think about yourself versus what you really are. And that's where you get to see the truth of who you really are, right? And your shadow is not necessarily even a bad thing either. Your shadow is there to project and help you in this dark world. And a lot of people who, who say, I'm just going to stifle, or I'm going to ignore my shadow, I'm going to ignore my ego, they have a lot of problems because this realm is a dark realm and you need a little bit of balls essentially to be able to navigate it. And if you don't have those balls, so to speak, then the courage just gets wasted upon you. And you need courage. It's one of the three pillar forces here of being a human being. It's definitely on the lowest end of the spectrum. The other would probably be like heart and mind. And courage is more like bodily activation. It's through your actions, right? But still, this is very important because everybody has an idea of who they think they are, and then everybody has an idea of who they don't want to be and what they don't want to accept. But if you just release that control over yourself and you allow yourself to be who you really are, then you're going to actually want to be the best version of yourself anyway. It is like your nervous system, you are like strangling your own nervous system, trying to control it, when really you just need to let it go, right? Because if you tangle up all the wires, then it's just going to be messy and the network's not going to work. But if you let the wires just kind of like hang free and they do their own thing, and you live your life the way that you're supposed to be living your life, making your decisions, making your mistakes, that is like a big aspect of what it means to, become the best version of yourself, because you have to fail in order to succeed, right? And then there is the fermentation. So this is where you start feeling a little bit better with your, the old begins to die and one starts to receive a glimpse of the new. So this is where the new starts to take over, and new operations, new habits, new ways of thinking. The first three stages are all about dissolving away what's no longer working. That fourth stage is where change really starts to occur. The fifth stage is where you start to see the change occur because you're sticking with it. Distillation, the sixth stage, is where you have to account for the change, right? You have to account for, the difference between your old life and your new life. And then coagulation is where everything just kind of comes together. And so there's many different stages to this. I do want to say that I want to give you guys some personal details here. So when you're in this stage, right? Coagulation, by the way, I didn't really cover this. It's time to become whole again. So when you become whole again, or you believe you become whole again, all right, then it opens you up for more calcination to burn away what exists that is no longer serving you, that's no longer necessary, that's no longer needed. Okay, so this is the cycle of repeating evolution. This is how evolution repeats itself. This is why this is so important to understand. This is also mitosis, right? Again, I love talking about mitosis because I really do believe it's at the science and it's at the crux of everything that makes us human. It's the first thing that we choose to do after the sperm hits the egg, the spark of light. We split apart and we split apart and we just keep doing that forever until we die. So this creates our psychology. It creates a cycle that we see in everything. So cyclically speaking, coagulation, becoming whole, just opens you up to get, dissolve away what's no longer there. And that's why it's called calcination, because it's like you have to go into the earth in order to get calcinated. So once you become coagulated, once everything is whole again, you have to go back into the earthly world so that you can be torn apart again. Okay, and this is really important because tearing ourselves apart is how we live, believe it or not. Like, we hate that. We want to be whole, but our bodies and our minds are made to be torn apart, right? Just like Jesus, just like, pretty much anything. So really important. So calcination, if you're in this stage, you could do brutally honest journaling, removing your digital clutter, or calling out your own bullshit. Okay. If you are in, let's see. Oh, this is like a little mixed up. Now I see the issue here. If you are in the, if you're in the dissolution stage, breath work, emotional processing, talking, therapy, shadow journaling is really good. If you are in the sublimation phase, the separation, I believe. Let me see. Actually, no, the separation is the death phase. So this is your day of silence, ending relationships or addictions, cutting ties with old versions of yourself. That's like the separation. And then you can have value clarification, boundary setting, and sorting emotional versus rational impulses. Then you go through the conjunction, the union. Carl Jung, get it? And that is aligning life choices with purpose, creative expression, embodying your highest values. Your fermentation, that would be through like meditation, symbolic visualization, reflective solitude. Distillation, that would be more like aligning life choices with purpose. So again, this is where like you're making a lot of deep decisions between your old life and your new life. And then finally, coagulation, you can focus on habit formation, creating routines, and daily identity statements. So it's really like, again, it's a psychological transformation mechanism on how you can completely recreate yourself. If you don't like who you are, this is one way that you can do it. Now, I have my own system. As I mentioned before and earlier, I do have an online university. And in that online university, I have a 7-form system, which I'm actually building a course for. But I also have a mindset reset course, which talks about all of these. It talks about alchemy. It talks about spirituality. It talks about the Bible. It talks about Buddhism. It talks about everything. And it talks on how you can recreate yourself, essentially. It's a 7-part course, okay, which is very much in line with the 7 stages of alchemy. So if that interests you, go check that out and give that a shot. However, the last couple of things I want to speak on about this modern stage of alchemy, we're kind of in a collective phase right now where things are dying and they're passing away. So we're really at like that final stage here, or we're maybe somewhere in the middle is probably more accurate, but we're working through how all of these things focalize, okay? We're working through this. I mean, we've got a world going through a societal breakdown. We have AI, political instability, financial upheavals, right? The financial world is changing. Cryptocurrency and AI are taking over. So this is a big deal, right? And so inner alchemy resurfaces as a way in which you can combat all of that, right? They want you to keep looking out there so that you're distracted from what's going on in here, and that's never any good. So inner alchemy resurgence is really about the ancient secrets coming back into the light, right? And this is how we can apply ancient wisdom in order for us to all be essentially on top of our own shit, being the best versions of ourselves that we can be, and then applying that to make real world change. So it's a self-optimization model. That's really what alchemy is all about. It's helping you evolve and become the best version of yourself, help you grow and change. And it's a beautiful system, and I love being able to study it. And if you want more information like this, as I mentioned, go check out my school, or you can even ask my AI tool. It has chat functionality. You can talk to it if you'd like vocally. You can ask it questions. And if you like that and that interests you, please do go check those out. But I love you guys. I really do appreciate you as always. Let me know, drop a comment down below what kind of videos you want to see next or what I can do to improve my channel. But I love you guys as always. Please spread the video around and take care.